If you've ever noticed that you can be having a completely fine day, and then one small moment shifts everything, you see someone your age doing better than you, or someone who seems more confident, more successful, more certain, and suddenly something tightens inside you. You didn't plan to compare, you know it doesn't help, but your mind does it anyway, quietly, automatically, almost like it's trying to prove something. It usually doesn't look dramatic. It's small things. Scrolling past someone's achievement and pausing just a second too long. Replaying a conversation later and thinking, I should have said it like that. Measuring your progress against someone else's timeline. Even when your situations are completely different, you don't always say it out loud. But internally, there's this subtle calculation happening. Where am I compared to them? And on the surface, it feels like insecurity, like a confidence issue. But that's not really what's happening underneath. Comparison isn't just about feeling less than, it's about trying to understand where you stand. Because as humans, we're wired to make sense of ourselves through other people. Not because we're weak, but because identity doesn't form in isolation. It forms in contrast. From early on, you start learning who you are based on feedback, praise, criticism, approval, rejection. You notice who gets attention, who gets ignored, who gets valued. And without realizing it, your brain starts building a map. A quiet system of ranking, measuring, adjusting, not consciously, but constantly. So when you compare yourself now, it's not random. It's your brain returning to something familiar, a way of orienting yourself in the social world, a way of asking, am I doing okay? Do I belong here? Am I enough in this context? And here's where it gets interesting. Most people think comparison comes from wanting to be better. But the deeper layer is, it comes from wanting to feel safe. Because in many cases, comparison isn't about ambition, it's about protection. If you can figure out where you stand, you reduce uncertainty. If you can predict how others might see you, you feel more in control. Even if that control comes through self-criticism. That's why comparison often feels compulsive. It's not just a habit, it's a strategy your mind uses to avoid social risk, to prevent rejection, to stay aligned with what feels acceptable. Think about how subtle it can be. You hesitate to speak up because someone else seems more articulate. You downplay your ideas because someone already did something similar, better. You question your progress because someone else moved faster. It doesn't look like fear, but underneath, it is. Not fear of failure exactly, but fear of being seen as less. And that's where identity gets involved. Because over time, these comparisons don't just stay as thoughts. They start shaping how you see yourself. Not based on who you actually are, but based on where you think you rank. So instead of asking, what do I want? The question quietly becomes, how do I measure up? Instead of feeling grounded in your own direction, you start adjusting based on other people's pace, other people's choices, other people's visibility. And the strange part is, even when you logically know it doesn't make sense, different lives, different paths, different timing, your mind still returns to comparison. Because it's not trying to be logical. It's trying to be certain. That's why even confident people compare themselves, even people who are doing well. Because comparison isn't just about low self-worth. It's about unresolved reference points, internal standards that were never fully questioned. And once those standards are there, your mind keeps checking, quietly asking, am I still okay relative to others? So the behavior continues, not because you want it to, but because a part of you still believes it's necessary. And when you start to see it this way, something shifts. Comparison stops looking like a personal flaw and starts looking like a pattern, a learned way of navigating identity. It was never just about envy or insecurity. It was about orientation, about trying to locate yourself in a world that constantly gives you signals about who matters and why. But the more you become aware of it, the more you notice when it's happening, that subtle shift in your attention, that internal measuring, that quiet tension, the less invisible it becomes. And once you see the pattern, you can't really unsee it because it was never random. It was your mind trying to understand where you belong. And that awareness changes how you experience those moments, not by forcing them away, but by recognizing what they actually are. If this explained something you felt but couldn't quite name, there's more to uncover. Understanding yourself is where all of this begins.